Diane Hart. I've been a potter for 43 years, and I love what I do, and potters don't retire, they just make less work as they get older. That's what I'm hoping for. I work in porcelain, high fire, and then I do the raku, which is the smoke fired pieces. I love making pots. I make about, I don't know, I go through like 2 tons of clay a year, and I just sell here. So each piece of clay has to be wedged, and what I'm doing is I'm getting the air out of it. So I make terrible bread now, because when you make bread, you introduce air. So my bread comes out like a brick, so I don't bother anymore, because I've been wedging clay for so long. So this is the spiral method of wedging. This is a Korean technique. So I'm actually, it has an axis and it looks like a shell almost. And then I gradually get it into a ball. And then you always put it upside down. Otherwise it could result in cracks. So there it is, 8 pounds of clay. So what I do is early in the morning, I'll just fill this whole thing with clay, depending on what I'm making. And I raised my wheel up because my back was hurting. So when I'm making larger pieces, I'll make them on a bat. Small pieces I just do off the hump or directly on the wheel head. But if I'm making a bowl, I can't really pick it up, so it'll be on a bat. And my hands are my best tools, but I do need some assistance. So these are some of the tools that I'm going to need to make a pot. In the old days, potters used animal ribs, so we still call these ribs. All these different, I have credit cards cut up in different shapes. But those are basically what I need. And my foot just can run the pedal, which runs the wheel. So I'm going to make a bowl for pasta or salad. You can get all your frustrations out. So what I'm doing is I have this lump of clay here. It's 8 pounds, and I'm trying to get all the bumps out of it. So it's called centering, and it's a hard thing to learn. So I'm pressing down with my top hand while I'm pressing in with my left hand. And so the clay has to conform to my hands. Because I'm making a bowl, I want to center it into that wide shape. So that's why people say, oh, do you have a plan for your pot? Yeah, you have to have a plan, because if I was making something tall, this lump of clay would be narrower. Then I'm going down in the middle, opening the clay up. So it's actually the start of a chunky bowl. Every piece of clay wants to go outward. So what I'm trying to do is I'm compressing the bottom, but I'm trying to keep the clay in for a while. So I'm going to, again, make the clay go in. Now this part is very thick, so what I want to do first is thin that out. I'm doing like a lobster grip here, just between my fingers and my thumb, and I'm lifting the clay up and getting rid of some of that weight at the top. And then I can go back down, and as I'm lifting now, my outside hand is underneath my inside hand, and that's how you get the clay to rise. You never have your hands opposite each other, because it won't go anywhere. So see, you can almost see my hands. So that gets rid of the weight too. The only way to thin out a piece is to go up. And then once you get it thin enough, you can shape the piece. Otherwise you'd have a really chunky, heavy bowl, which you have in the beginning when you're first making pots. Now I have my rib. So I'm pressing from the inside. And all the clay gets recycled. So everything that lands on the floor ends up in a pile, gets recycled. And that's what I like about clay. It's not precious like silver. And what I've done is I've actually smoothed up the outside and compressed it a little bit. So I have all different types of ribs. And this will shape the inside of the bowl a little, define it a little bit more. So let's see. If I want to bend the rim down, which I might do for this piece, so I can decorate the rim later, I'll use the rib to do that. You have to make sure to wet your tools, otherwise they'll drag on the clay. And so this is a nice way to flatten a rim. And everything I do, I've learned from watching somebody else or reading about it. I may go to a workshop and just learn this one way to emphasize the rim. By putting a line in the clay, it strengthens the piece so it doesn't warp. Because this clay doesn't have a lot of grog in it, it tends to warp. But putting that line there, it strengthens it. Grog is a fired clay. It strengthens the clay body. So that's it. I just get rid of enough clay here, and then I can bring this wire underneath. If I didn't wire it, I would have a problem with cracking later. So I'm just taking this through, separating it, taking this bat off the wheel. So this is the quickest part of the whole process, and there's 24 steps from me bringing the clay in to it going out the front door. Now this bowl I made the other day. It stiffens it. So this is like cream cheese when I take the bowl off the wheel. This is like cheddar cheese. So 24 hours later, so I have to feel how much clay I have left here. It's hard to get underneath here when the clay is so wet. So what I do is I can feel how much clay I have here. I can flip it over, and now I'm going to tool or trim the bottom. I have to get this on center again, and I can do it by tapping the clay. Then I'm using this loop tool to get rid of the excess clay. And you saw that I actually felt it, so I know how much clay is there. And this is the way a wood turner would work, by taking away the clay rather than changing the shape. And all this clay gets recycled. So we don't worry about any clay hitting the floor or anything. Notice I have a little kind of contained area here. Now I'm putting on the foot. The less surface of the clay that touches the kiln shelf, the better. So that's why I put a foot on here. I'm going to carve out the middle. This is nice. You know, during the winter when I'm working, I listen to books on tape. And I just kind of like drift off and it becomes very meditative. In the summer, I can't listen to books on tape because I'm too busy. I'm always getting up. And I can hear how much clay I have. These are all little nuances that you become familiar with. I remember the first pot I made took me 45 minutes to make it. So it's just a learning curve. Even Chelsea, my assistant, she went to college for ceramics also. And every time I tell her something, she's like, they didn't teach me that in college. No, but they didn't know it. I mean, when I worked in a factory, I learned all these techniques. That sounds good. So I put the ruler across to make sure I don't have any, I can see light all the way through. Otherwise, if I don't do that, then I might have a little spinner, a bowl that spins on the table. Yeah, that's good. And I sign every piece. My name is Diane Hart, spelled like heart, but I put a little heart there too.